Hello and welcome back, and today I'm going to talk about QNAP 2 bays. A number of you have probably found this video because you've been thinking about buying a brand new NAS. You've settled on a 2-bay NAS system and you've seen the brand QNAP and gone, interesting. So when you're looking at QNAP NASs, it's got to be said that 2-bay NASs, although they are by far the most affordable of their entire range, it's still a very diverse selection of products. And if you go through the portfolio, whether it's within individual sub-ranges or the entire range as a whole, and you go to the filter and click 2 bays only, you notice that the range is enormous. So in today's video, I'm going to talk about all of the currently generation available 2-bay NASs on the market today. My God, I hate seagulls. And I'm going to be talking about what they've all got in common, what they can all do, but more importantly, what they can't do. And I'm going to talk about where the strengths of individual 2-bays lie, in the hope in helping you decide on what's the best 2-bay QNAP NAS for you, and you get it right first time. Before we go any further, a few disclaimers straight off the bat. First and foremost, I'm only going to be looking at 2-bay NASs that are currently available on their website. I'm not going to be looking at any NAS that's gone out of the range. It's been released too long ago and they've stopped supporting its hardware. I'm not going to be talking about really old ones, and this is being recorded in summer or July 2021 here in the UK. So if they do release some new 2-bays in the near future, I apologise if they're not in this video. And the last thing I'm going to talk about is there's one NAS I'm not going to talk about in this video because I consider it an anomaly, and that is the HS453DX. It's technically a 2-bay. It's that silent NAS. It's in the copper base panel thing. It's got 2 hard drive bays and 2 SSD bays. It's technically a 2-bay, but it's really not. It's a 4-bay that's got those SSDs, it's got 10 GBE, and I don't think it's really a 2-bay NAS, and I'm not going to include it in this video. I love that NAS, it's one of my favourite NASs of all time, but unfortunately I'm not going to classify it as a 2-bay for this video. So do check out my reviews on that, and hopefully we're going to do a revisit to that system sometime very, very soon. But all of the 2-bays in today's system, as I say, are available worldwide, and they are available in a number of different configurations, different memories in some cases. So it's worth highlighting that although I am only going to talk about these 6 NASs, there are other versions out there with different amounts of memory inside that you can look at, and it will scale the price accordingly. But all 6 of them will be able to do the following. First and foremost, they will all support QNAP's QTS platform, currently in version QTS 4.5, but I do know they're working on a beta of 5 currently, and with QTS 5 hopefully planned for the end of July. All of these systems support QTS currently in, I think the updates are all at exactly the same time, but some of them settings and some of the available options have been slightly trimmed back for the more cost-effective systems that I'll talk about later on. But they all do have access to file management, Q-search, snapshots, RAID technology. You've got encryption built into it as well. So you've got all of that lovely security. You've got the multi-tiered backup solution, hybrid backup sync that's available on all 6 of these solutions. On top of that, if you are a multimedia user, if you are someone that wants to use this just for a bit of fun around the house, watch a few of your movies, they all support DLNA. They all support video station, music station, photo station, and QMaggie, and they can all be visible on your Amazon Fire Stick and a number of other different third-party applications for use of voice activation and things like Amazon Alexa. They've all 6 have got support of containers, something that's lovely to hear, and they all support RAID 0 and RAID 1. There's no fancy pants flexible RAID here, but they can all sort of be expanded with the QNAP TL and TR series, although I would say that at the more expensive end of the table later on, you're going to notice that expandability, and particularly RAID expandability, is something only really available on more expensive devices. They've all got USB front-mounted port and one-touch backup buttons there, something I personally love. I know it's arcane. I know it's really old-fashioned there, probably not arcane there, archaic. But still, nonetheless, I like that there's USB 1 mounted backup. They've all got USB 3 to a different degree that we'll talk about. They've all got support of surveillance applications, although there are different apps out there, and they also allow you to use a USB camera as a camera as well. There's QMaggie, as mentioned, with photo recognition, and on the more powerful NASs, thing recognition as well. And then with those multimedia apps as well, you've got access to the Multimedia console app, where you can get all your indexing done intelligently and basically have a very refined and very well-to-do system. Also, the majority of these systems also support that adapter, the ability to allow you to add a 5 gigabit Ethernet connection via USB. The majority of them support it, and even the ones that technically don't are able to see it. They just don't have the horsepower to really saturate that connection. But it's still good that you can expand these NASs and add better network interface ports in their lifespan. But that's enough about what they've got in common. They're all very capable devices, but it has to be said that there's a reason that some are more expensive than others, and the power that's inside individual units really does open the door to better hardware throughout and better software, of course. So let's go straight into the devices. So our 6 NAS devices from QNAP. At the very end, the most cost-effective one, arguably, but also the one that's got the least power under the bonnet, is the TS231K. It arrives with an Annapurna Alpine AL214, which is the quad-core 1.7 GHz 32-bit processor, and it also arrives with 1 gig of non-upgradable DDR3 memory. Next up on the rung, we have the TS231P3, slightly newer generation, although released at a very similar time to the K there. It's a newer generation Annapurna processor, the AL213, and this CPU, again, quad-core 1.7 GHz, but this time it arrives with 4 gig of memory that can be upgraded to 8 gig. So there's a lot of throughput potential there, and there's also enhanced network connectivity that I'm going to talk about later on. Next up, we have probably the newer of the cost-effective range, the TS230, and the TS230 takes advantage of a 64-bit ARM-based processor known as the Realtek RTD 1296, and it also arrives with 2 gig of memory. And although that CPU has been knocking around the houses now for a couple of years, they still make a good job of it and are able to take advantage of 4K transcoding at HEVC. So that processor, although it's not going to blow your mind, it does get quite a lot done for such a modest, device. Now, after that, we move into the Intel powered devices, of which there are 3. There is the TS251 Plus, a NAS that's like 5 years old now and still going strong. It's got a pretty old CPU at this point as well, the J1900. It's a quad-core 2.0 GHz processor that can be burst up to 2.4 GHz per core, and it also arrives with 2 gig of DDR3L memory that can be upgraded to 8 gig. For some reason, this device is still around. It still sells well, even though we have seen, in its lifespan, 3 other Intel powered 2 bays from QNAP in that time. Actually, technically 5, really, when you look at the 5.1 series. And of course, this is the TS251D next. Takes advantage of Intel CPU there, the Celeron J4025, recently upgraded from the J4005. This CPU is a dual-core 2.0 GHz CPU that can be burst up to 2.9 GHz, and it has some real fancy integrated graphics there to take care of 4K and 1080p transcoding on the fly. It also has 2 gig of DDR4 memory that can be upgraded up to 8 gig. And finally, at the other end of the table, far away there, by far the best one of the lot, let's not mince words, it is the TS253D. It's got the best CPU, quad-core Celeron. It's J4125, and that CPU is a quad-core 2.0 GHz CPU that can be burst up to 2.7. It's got that integrated graphics, and of course it has 4 gig of DDR4 memory that can be upgraded to 8 gig. So I said the words ARM a lot there, and towards the end the x86 processor. That's because Intel and AMD x86 based processors just get more done. They've got more hardware and they can handle more complex and longer instruction in a way that ARM processors just can't. They are designed to be fantastically efficient, those CPUs, and even the 64-bit one, although it does a better job of compressing complex code, it will never be as good as these Intels. And that's probably one of the main reasons the 251 Plus still continues to sell as well as it does. Of all of these 6 systems, they do scale in price. There will be dips as you go up the scale, and sometimes it will largely be at this end of the table that the prices will fluctuate up and down. But generally, you do find that the price will get higher as you go to that end of the table. But the features and functionality supported, as well as the hardware inside, are suitably increased as you go through it as well. So the first thing, I already sort of touched on it earlier, network connectivity. All of these devices, I've got network interface ports, but what's really interesting is all but one have 2 network interface ports. So the very end one there, the 31K, that system arrives with 2 1 gigabit Ethernet ports there. So link aggregation's on the table, around 210, 220 megabytes per second externally. Lovely little speed performance on this 2 bay, although that CPU will limit things a little bit in file transfers. Then you've got the P3 there, the 231P3. That device arrives with one GBE port and one 2.5 GBE port. With link aggregation, that means 3.5 gigabit connectivity, which, ironically, when you've got two hard drives in a RAID 1 or even a RAID 0, slightly less safe environment, this system, that's the right amount of saturation with a couple of hard drives in there, 3 to 350 megs. And I think this system does a very, very good job of having that enhanced network connectivity, but still keeping it incredibly budget. Weirdly, the TS230 not only has 1 gigabit LAN port, but it's not, it's a gigabit LAN. It's 1 GBE. It's 100 to 109 megabytes. It's a real shame that this system looks as nice as it does, and it's by far the quietest, by the way, as well. I should have highlighted that earlier on. This is the quietest NAS of the lot. It's only got 1 gigabit Ethernet, which is a real crying shame given how much QNAP has doubled down on 2.5 GBE at the price of 1 GBE on their systems. Now, the old veteran, the oldest NAS there, the 251 Plus, this system arrives with two 1 GBE ports on there, but that's what I would have expected. It came out in 2015, for Christ's sake. It has done well to hang on this long. For a single NAS family to have survived this long is just genuinely impressive to me. Next up, you've got the 251D, and the 251D only has the one LAN port, but it has a PCIe upgrade slot that we're going to talk about later on, so you can scale the network connectivity quite substantially. And finally, at the end there, that's where it all lives. The 253D at the end there not only has two 2.5 GBE ports providing up to a potential link aggregation of 5 GBE, but it also has that PCIe upgrade slot to add more network upgrades as well as using that adapter as well. A huge amount of connectivity there. And then you've got to wonder, is it too much connectivity for two hard drives to be able to saturate there? So you've got, if anything, more connectivity there than you're ever going to need. So that is the network connectivity of all of these devices. And if you're going to be, playing games off a Steam library on a NAS, or you're going to be editing photos or maybe some 1080p video, move to that end of the table. Definitely. But the general file transmission, low-level surveillance, and just general having all your devices backing up regularly, you can happily move to this end of the table. And just a real shame about that 230, having that great CPU, but then bottlenecked on 1 GBE. Now, as mentioned, the two at this end of the table have got PCIe connectivity. They've both got PCIe Gen 2 times 4, which means Gen 2, 500 megabytes per second times 4 means these PCIe slots provide bandwidths between the card to the NAS of 2000 megs. That means these systems can comfortably support 10 GBE, although you wouldn't bother, it's a 2-bay, that's madness. But you can also use Wi-Fi 6 upgrade cards. You can also use SSD cache cards and add more SSDs. You can use combo cards that allow you, there's one up there, to install not only an NVMe card or two inside, but also a combined 10G port, and massively upscale the performance on both the 251D and the 253D. Both of these systems have got a tremendous amount of scalability. Even in the more affordable model that knocks around for about $250, $300, it's still a very, very good and functional NAS that in terms of network connectivity and upgradability really brings a lot to the party. So then we can talk about other ports on these systems, because it has to be said, unlike a lot of other NAS brands, QNAP kind of brings more connections than anyone else to a lot of their systems. They've all got USB, it has to be said. The combination in some cases with the budget end here, having either all USB 3 or a combination USB 3 and USB 2. And by USB 3, I of course mean USB 3.2 Gen 1. Awful naming convention. But at this end of the table, with these three, because they've got embedded graphics processors, and because they've got extra bit of oomph inside, they've all got HDMI ports. So all of these, we've got an HDMI 1.4B on the 251 Plus, so 1080p at 60 frames per second output and 4K at 30 frames per second. But these two on the end have got 4K HDMI out. So that's 60 frames per second at 4K, and that's HDMI 2.0 port. That means if you use the parallel NAS application known as an HD station, you can run surveillance, you can run multimedia, you can run a VM, you can run Linux VMs, you can run all manner of applications on these two NAS, but at the same time use them as a NAS simultaneously. And that HDMI out, in conjunction with the USB ports, which are USB 3 and 2 on all three of these devices, you can use the USB 2 ports, of course, for storage, there's no point, it'll take forever. But you can also use those USB 2 ports for a keyboard and a mouse. So you can put an HDMI monitor, keyboard and mouse, KVM setup, boom. And then you've got a standalone computer, a standalone surveillance system, loads of opportunity for scalability and business use on these three systems. Now, I mentioned those USB 3 ports and expandability. It's worth highlighting that the QNAP expansion TL and TR series are supported on these systems. You can attach either JBOD or hardware RAID enclosures to increase the storage on all three of these systems. Less so at this end of the table, but definitely on all three of these. It's great to be able to know that the 2 bays of storage you're using are not the end of the world, and if they get full, you can bolt on more storage as you need it. And all of those expansions either use USB 3 or, supported by the other two, you can install the PCIe upgrade slots and get some real performance benefits of those expansions. So you can have this 2-bay NAS, which you can then attach maybe the 4, 6 or 8 bay expansion that has a PCIe card, and then connect to this 2-bay an expansion device that could give you 2, 3, 4 or even 5,000 megabytes per second throughput for that expansion. It's just worth remembering the PCIe's on these, you can't exceed 2,000, so make sure you shop sensibly. So I mentioned noise. I will highlight that the devices at this end of the table, they're a little noisier. They're not the quietest, certainly, but these two at the budget end are by far the noisiest. I have no idea why, whether you look at QNAP's own spec sheets or you've seen some of my earlier testing where we did some performance benchmarks on the 230, not the 230, the 231K and the P3. Both of these are actually pretty noisy NASes, and not as noisy as Seagulls, obviously, but it was mainly just the vibrations and the very plasticky, kind of very thin-walled design of those chassis resulting in a larger ambient noise in utilization. Obviously, that was with standard 4TB drives. The minute you go to enterprise-grade size drives, that noise is really going to ramp skyward. Finally, we can talk about software capabilities and what these things differ with, because it has to be said that the bulk of QNAP applications run on all of these systems. So if you are taking advantage of surveillance, all of them have got surveillance software and camera licenses. But this end of the table, these three, they arrive with the older generation surveillance platform from QNAP known as Surveillance Station. They've got 2 camera licenses and you can support a bunch of cameras on there, but that software is nowhere near as good or as intuitive or responsive or just damn near impressive as the platform for these three, QVR Pro. All three of these have got 8 camera licenses. So 8 camera licenses and a fully fledged enterprise grade surveillance setup there. Gotta love that. They do an incredible job there with that platform, and although it's not quite as intuitive in the web browser as Synology's offering, I would say using the clients and remote level hardware and using your phone and other third-party cameras, the QNAP surveillance software wins on points, and I do like that platform there. You can use the other surveillance software, but I don't see why you'd bother given that QVR Pro is so damn good. When it comes to multimedia, I've already touched on that all 6 of these devices support 1080p pretty well with this end of the table, transcoding a lot of stuff, and they all support to a lesser or greater degree 4K, although you're really going to struggle with these two at the other end of the table. But I will say, if you are looking to take advantage of multimedia, you need to go to the 251D or go for the TS253D. Both of those not only transcoded very well within Plex Media Server at 1080p, they're even able to, reshape a lot of the 4K stuff as well. Once you hit about 10 to 30 megabits per second bitrate, they did very, very well. And also, I haven't even touched on that these two support not only Docker, their own Docker application known as Container Station. Not only does it support Ubuntu Station or Linux Station that allows you to deploy a VM of Linux within about 3 clicks internally. Not only do they have Virtualization Station that allows you to download Windows VMs at the click of a button, and a bunch of other third-party network and other tools as well, like Zabbix and pfSense. But all 3 of these systems here at this end, as mentioned, can deploy these locally on an HDMI monitor using QVM. So having the NAS double up as a remote PC that you can come home, work on, but then also access remotely from a coffee shop or a commute, Come on, that's pretty cool. And that's something only really available at this end of the table, and more precisely with the 2 at the end. And that's really it. If there's one big message I want you to take from this video, it is that the more you spend, the more you get. And QNAP has always been a brand that does very good software. Fair play to them. A lot of their software, I think, is more evolved than it's ever been before. But the hardware is where they've really excelled more than anywhere. And as you move along this table, though the price jumps between each system are very small, 50. I think the most is like $75. As you go up each tier, they do get progressively more powerful, and you get better value for money as you move along the table. Last thing I'd add is warranty support, of course. All of these arrive with QNAP warranty, with the first 5 arriving with 2 years of manufacturer's warranty, and the 253D arriving with 3 years of warranty, although all of them can be extended for a small fee. So there's lots of hardware, lots of software, and lots of the feature and functionality of these 2 bays. Next up, we will be looking at the 4 bays from QNAP. Bear in mind that when you are spending money on a network attached storage system, you're still going to get what you pay for. And if from watching this video you've gone, I heard him say 4K on that one, let's buy that one, hold your horses, Tex. You get what you pay for, and you've got to understand that there's a reason that this one's more expensive. It's not just network connections, it's about the internal horsepower, the upgradability and the scalability of that 253D, and it's the reason I will always recommend that one over any other. If I had to say which one of these is the best value, probably the 230. But it doesn't make it the best NAS now, does it? Thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, do let me know in the comments. Click like if you've enjoyed it, of course, as well. But click subscribe to be tuned up for these videos. If you do know a way to get rid of seagulls very, very quickly without using a machine gun, do let me know. That might find it helpful. But apart from that, thank you so much for watching. Take advantage of the free advice section over on NAS Compares below. It is completely free. Me and Eddie, the web guy, will answer every one of your inquiries. But apart from that, I will see you next time.